Easy Explain, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman by Mary Wollstonecraft, Ethical Problems Part 2. So here we're going to start looking more so at what she has to say about parenting and education and how it all ties to women's rights. So starting off with Chapter 11, Duty to Parents. Mary says, children ought not, be taught to make allowance for the faults of their parents, because every such allowance weakens the force of reason in their minds and makes them still more indulgent to their own. More of the same passage here, just going to keep going. Is one of the most sublime virtues of maturity that leads us to be severe with respect to ourselves and forbearing to others. For children should only be taught the simple virtues. For if they begin too early to make allowance for human passions and manners, they wear off the fine edge of the criterion by which they should regulate their own and become unjust in the same proportion as they grow indulgent. So the big takeaway here, the big message here is that children should be taught to view their parents as people, right? The parents should not be put up on this high pedestal where they can do no wrong. We should be teaching children virtues, the simple ones. We shouldn't be confusing them, complicating things. But parents should not be held like they can't do anything wrong. Mary's saying here that's going to start messing with the reason of children as they develop their faculties of reason. Moving on here to another rather long one, broken up to a few parts. Mary says, the affections of children and weak people are always selfish. They love their relatives because they are beloved by them and not on account of any virtues. Yet, till esteem and love are blended together in the first affection and reason made the foundation of the first duty, morality will stumble at the threshold. So quick pause right here in the first two parts. Essentially, Mary's saying, we love our family members largely because they love us. It's almost like this idea of convenience, going back to the first set of ethical problems that she saw in some of these issues cropping up socially. But we really need to be bringing reason into our relationships, our duties, our affections. Otherwise, we could be, giving our time and our love to people who aren't moral, or maybe we're not developing our own morals in the best possible way. So still, same part of the same passage here. She goes on, she says, but till society is very differently constituted, parents, I fear, will still insist on being obeyed, because they will be obeyed, and constantly endeavor to settle that power on a divine right, which will not bear the investigation of reason. So here Mary, again, is picking issue this social practice where no matter what, parents are revered, our children are obeying our parents. And here she's calling out that, a lot of people, based on their religious beliefs, think that this should be the case, and that we can't look into this, we can't question it. And she sees that as a problem. So moving on to what Mary says about education and the education of women. This is in her chapter 12 of the Vindication. Again, big passage, chunked into a few parts. Mary says, to render also the social compact truly equitable, and in order to spread those enlightening principles, which alone can ameliorate the fate of man, women must be allowed to found their virtue on knowledge, which is scarcely possible unless they be educated by the same pursuits as men. Call out right here in the beginning that women are entitled to the same quality and same type of education that men are. She goes on, for they are now made so inferior by ignorance and low desires as not to deserve to be ranked with them, women being ranked with men, or by the serpentine wriggling of cunning they meaning women, mount the tree of knowledge and only acquire sufficient to lead men astray. So what Mary's saying here is that the current situation is that women are being shown this other track of education, these other things to focus their minds and time on. And, if they do want to get to the same level of knowledge as men, they need to kind of deceive their way there. They need to wriggle up this tree of knowledge like the snake. There's a snake metaphor here. And right, this is just not great. This is not great for anybody, for men either. Different quote. She goes on. Mary says, it is plain from the history of all nations that women cannot be confined to merely domestic pursuits, for they will not fulfill family duties unless their minds take a wider range. And whilst they are kept in ignorance, they become in the same proportion the slaves of pleasure as they are the slaves of man. So Mary has this point here that if we look at, history in all nations all over the world, women need an education, right? They can't even fulfill the basic family duties that they have if they're not being allowed to learn and expand their minds. And this is, just very harmful for everyone involved. Same passage, another part, Mary says, nor can they be shut out of great enterprises, though the narrowness of their minds often make them mar what they are unable to comprehend. Jump ahead there. So what Mary's saying here, to sum this up, we need to give women an education, or else it's not getting anybody anywhere. I think that'll become clear in this next bit here. She says, make women rational creatures and free citizens, and they will quickly become good wives and mothers. That is, if men do not neglect the duties of husbands and fathers. All right, so here's this two piecemeal call here. She's saying women need to pursue their own reason. They need to have all the same freedoms men do. And from this, they'll be great wives, great mothers, right? There's no doubt in that. One is going to follow from the other. It's all going to be connected. And she's also holding the same standard to men. She's also calling out that men have the same duties, similar ways. They have this education, great, but they also need to be involved in these family duties just as much as women are, right? They need to be good husbands and good fathers. Moving on to chapter 13, one of the last chapters of the book here, some concluding remarks. I want to leave the final passage here from section 5 of this chapter. It's a bit of a long one, but I think it's a great overall summary of some of these ethical issues Mary's talking about here. She says, but we shall not see women affectionate till more equality be established in society, till ranks are confounded and women freed. Neither shall we see that dignified domestic happiness, the simple grandeur of which cannot be relished by ignorant or vitiated minds, nor will the important task of education ever be properly begun till the person of a woman is no longer preferred to her mind. For it be as wise to expect corn from tares or figs from thistles, as that a foolish, ignorant woman should be a good mother. Huge message here at the end, right? We really need to, as a society, be preferring the minds of women to just their bodies, right? Call out here from Mary. We need to educate women. We need to get them to the same level as men. We need equality across the board. And really, until that point, you can't expect women to be even the best mothers that they could be unless we're at least here, right? Equality for both sexes, especially in terms of education and duties and expectations and morals. So that about sums up the ethical problems for Mary, and I hope this helped.